Reasons why I'm inclined to believe the ancient Egyptians when they claim that they are a legacy civilization. They are not the first ones. They didn't invent it. They are in fact a restart, a second go, a 2.0, and that their original civilization happened before, earlier. And there are little remnants and clues and facts that do kind of point to this. So first off, we literally have surviving fragments of documents, mainly the Turin King's List and the Palermo Stone, which is an ancient, early dynastic king's list of all of the early pharaonic kings, and also pre-dynastic and like way into prehistory list of historical kings of the Egyptian civilization. They thought this was important enough to jot it down in the early dynasties. Memory was memorying. They also talk about this magical land of the West that was super fertile and rich and green, and well, most like modern scholars think that they're talking about some sort of like magical hypothetical heaven. But what if it was actually a recall back to a memory of an actual land in the West that was like pretty lush? Well, it turns out like science is saying, well, that's exactly what the Sahara was. Above is modern day Sahara. It's pretty intense. There's like sand and heat and death, and there's like not a lot there. Like nobody wants to live in the Sahara. But 8,000 years ago, it was beautiful. It was green and lush, and the whole of North Africa was connected by ancient waterways and lakes and rivers, and it would have been the best place to live like 10,000 years ago. I would have lived there. But scientists are doing lots of studies now on the change of the Green Sahara to the Desert Sahara. Turns out that this ecosystem flipped and it changed quickly. Not over thousands of years, as you would think, but in a couple of centuries, as in just a few lifetimes, a generation or two of people. It went from being this to that. And the only place that still had a livable water source and ecosystem was along the Nile. And that's why everybody sort of went that way and set up camp where Egypt is today. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the exact timing of the Green Sahara turning into a desert is the exact timing of the early dynasties of Egypt, just popping out of the sand, ready to go, with megalithic architecture and civilization just done, just sort of sorted. Because the early dynasties are my favourite period of dynastic Egypt, because I think it's when they had the biggest, better, coolest stuff. And now there is genetic studies of DNA of early humans from that time that do suggest that there was an integrated mix from the Sahara, from North Africa, with the Near Easterners. They were coming and going, they were toing and froing. It wasn't just like nomadic separate groups. There was a massive cultural mix. And there is also a pattern trail of DNA that shows this migration from the west to the east to end up settling in what is now Giza, the Nile, pharaonic Egypt. So considering that we've only really studied or excavated 1% of the whole Sahara region, I don't think that it's completely unlikely that we would find remnants of ancient sites from this precursor civilization that the Egyptians are claiming that they came from, literally, from the beautiful green magical land in the West. In fact, in 2004, there was like a news report that came out about a prehistoric town being found in the Sahara Desert, I think more over near Morocco. And they said it was 15,000 years old, an ancient Berber town. And it showed like evidence of civilization, like a burial site, communal areas, blah, 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 blah. But then since 2004, I can't find any more information on this site. It kind of like got announced and then... So we have ancient texts literally describing and naming a society that went back into antiquity, and also describing a land in the West that is lush and green and beautiful and plentiful and like the best place to live. And then we have science that's backing up that exactly that was true. And the timeline of this changing and the reason why everyone had to evacuate way over to Egypt, and also the genetic DNA evidence that really supports the fact that that did happen and that there were, in fact, societies living in the Green Sahara that were mixing and trading and crossing between the Levant and West Africa. And it would also account for why there are all these amazing pre-dynastic artifacts that are being found in Egypt, like remnants of this amazing culture that could really, really work with stone, who knew their stone, who knew how to handle it, knew how to build with it. And that culture really tapers off and disappears after the first few dynasties. So it either springs up out of nowhere in the first dynasty, lasts for a couple and disappears, or these are legacy pieces that were brought in from the Green Sahara. And that's why it died off, because obviously it would. But they're remnants and little trickles, little clues. I mean, it would make sense when you look at it at the picture altogether. And if it turns out that the scans that have been going on around Egypt, which is showing all of these underground, deeper components and connected networks of tunnels, etc., if this turns out to all be legit, then that also links in with the idea that there is more to the story, there is more to the history, and that maybe these sites like Giza really were the legacy civilizations restarting again, that they were going back to either an older site, an older outpost, and regenerating the whole area, then building the pyramids, or restoring the pyramids, regenerating the area, blah, 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 blah. Like, I can see, it makes sense as a whole picture in my mind. What do you think? Do you think we are missing a whole chunk of history under the Sahara? Do you want to join me with a bucket and spade, and shall we have a look?